That night, New York glowed under a blaze of lights, the skyscrapers rising like torches lighting up the June sky. In a luxurious penthouse on Park Avenue, the clinking of wine glasses mingled with the laughter of the elite. Amid this opulent space, Ethan Caldwell, a 35-year-old white American millionaire, quietly contemplates on the balcony. With neatly combed blonde hair, piercing blue eyes, and a flawlessly tailored black suit, he radiated a confidence that bordered on arrogance. To Ethan, the world was merely a chessboard, and he always held the king. Ethan took a sip of champagne, his gaze drifting over the party guests. They were businessmen, celebrities, and politicians, people he could manipulate with a mere snap of his fingers. Money, power, fame, all were within his grasp. Caldwell Enterprises. The financial empire he built from his father's inheritance had propelled him to the top. Yet it was this very invincibility that left Ethan feeling empty. Nothing challenged him anymore. "Ethan, you look like you're dying of boredom," a deep voice called out, snapping him from his thoughts. James Harper, his college friend and a venture capitalist, stepped onto the balcony with a mischievous smile. With tousled brown hair and sparkling eyes, James always knew how to stir things up. A glass of red wine was in his hand, swirling gently as if he were weighing a bold idea. Ethan raised an eyebrow, not bothering to turn. "Bored?" "Not exactly. I don't see anything interesting here. All of them," he nodded toward the crowd, "are predictable. I say something and I already know what they'll do." James chuckled, leaning against the marble railing. "Ethan, you're always like that, as if the world is your playground. But I bet there's one thing even your money can't buy." Ethan turned a flicker of curiosity and challenge in his eyes. "Is that so? Tell me, James, what is it that I can't have?" James took a sip of his wine, his smile growing more dangerous. He pointed toward the street below, where a lone figure sat under the dim glow of a street lamp. A black woman, likely in her late 20s, was curled on the sidewalk. Her natural curly hair was messy, tied back with a worn cloth. Her clothes were tattered and dusty, and in front of her lay a crudely handwritten cardboard sign. "Please help. Thank you." Beside it was a plastic cup holding a few scattered coins. James said, his voice laced with provocation, "I bet you $3 million you can't turn her into a lady of high society, bring her into our world, and live with her as your wife for 6 months. If you succeed, I'll pay. If you fail, you owe me." Ethan narrowed his eyes, locking his gaze on the woman below. She looked small and fragile, but she held her head up as if refusing to yield to her circumstances caught his attention. To Ethan, she wasn't a person, she was a challenge, a new pawn in a game he was sure to win. $3 million. Ethan repeated, the corner of his mouth curling into a smug smile. "You underestimate me, James. Not only can I do it, I'll exceed your expectations." James raised his glass, his eyes gleaming. "Then go ahead. But remember, Ethan, she's not a toy for your amusement. If you fail, it won't just be money you lose." Ethan brushed off the warning, his eyes still fixed on the woman on the street. "Consider it done. Tonight marks the start of an exciting game." He turned back inside, placed his champagne glass on the table, and walked out of the party without another word. James remained on the balcony, watching Ethan leave with a cryptic smile. He knew Ethan never walked away from a bet, but James sensed something would spiral beyond his arrogant friend's control this time. Ethan stepped onto the street, his polished leather shoes contrasting with the filthy pavement. The early summer night air carried a chill, but he didn't notice. His mind raced with a plan. Turning a homeless woman into a lady of high society. Easy. He had money, a team of professionals, and most importantly, the ability to make anyone bend to his will. But as he approached, and the streetlight revealed her figure more clearly, Ethan instinctively slowed. Her name was Maya Johnson, though Ethan didn't know that yet. Maya sat with her back against a brick wall, her thin arms wrapped around her knees. Her deep brown eyes, though tired, still carried a spark of resilience. In front of her, the "Please Help" sign seemed more like an unwilling declaration, as if she'd rather starve than beg. A few passers-by dropped coins into her cup, but Maya didn't look up. She was used to the world's indifference. Ethan stopped a few steps away, arms crossed, observing. She was a project in his mind, something to be fixed to fit his world. But when Maya lifted her head and their eyes met, Ethan felt a jolt. Not attraction, but a strange sensation, like she could see right through him. "What do you want?" Maya asked, her voice hoarse but sharp, with no trace of fear. She pulled herself inward slightly, bracing for danger. Ethan smiled the smile he used to disarm business rivals. "It's not what you want. It's what I can offer you." He stepped closer, voice calm and confident. "I'm Ethan Caldwell. I have a proposition, a chance to change your life." Maya frowned, her eyes filled with suspicion. "I don't need your pity, and I don't need empty words." She stood up, legs trembling from hunger and cold. "If you want to help, drop money in the cup and walk away." Ethan didn't flinch. He pulled out his wallet, took out a wad of cash, and placed it in her hand. "Here's $500. Consider it a gesture of goodwill. But I'm not talking about pity. I'm talking about a deal. Marry me for 6 months, and I'll give you $5 million, a life you've never dreamed of." Maya stared at the cash, then at Ethan, her eyes shifting from suspicion to fury. "Who do you think I am? Some toy for the rich to play with?" She threw the money to the ground, her voice trembling with rage. "Get out of here before I call the cops." For the first time in years, Ethan was caught off guard. No one had ever rejected him like that. But instead of anger, he felt intrigued. "You misunderstand," he said, his tone softer. "This isn't a joke. I need someone like you for a project. You'll have a home, clothes, food, everything. After 6 months, we part ways and you're wealthy. No strings attached, no obligations." Maya said nothing. Her hands clenched. She looked down at the money on the sidewalk and then at Ethan. Memories of hunger nights under bridges and shattered dreams resurfaced in her mind. She knew she had nothing to lose, but her dignity screamed in protest. Still, a small part of her, desperate for one more chance, hesitated. "Why me?" she asked, voice low but sharp. Ethan shrugged, his smile returning. "Because you're here, and because I believe you can do it." Maya stared at him, trying to read the true intent behind the man before her. She didn't trust him, but the cold and the gnawing in her stomach made it impossible to ignore. Finally, she bent down and picked up the money, but not to keep it. She shoved it into Ethan's coat pocket. "I'll think about it. But if this is some scam, you'll regret it." Ethan nodded, pulling out a business card and handing it to her. "Call me when you decide. But don't keep me waiting, Maya." She took the card, unaware that she had just stepped into a game that would forever change their lives. The night in New York never stopped moving car horns, and the rush of life echoed through the streets. Maya Johnson stood under the streetlight, holding Ethan Caldwell's business card, cold. The embossed letters on the glossy paper, "Ethan Caldwell, president of Caldwell Enterprises," reminded her of the unbridgeable chasm between her and the man who had just walked away. She slipped the card into the pocket of her torn coat, her eyes sweeping the bustling avenue. Part of her wanted to throw it away, forget that arrogant millionaire. But another part, desperate for an escape, made her hesitate. Maya sat back down on the sidewalk, her back against the freezing brick wall. her frail hands wrapped around her knees, trying to quiet the gnawing hunger in her belly. 5 years ago, she had been a promising artist, working in a small gallery in Brooklyn, dreaming of hosting her exhibition. But a chain of tragedies, being laid off her family, torn apart by debt, and eventually losing her home, had forced her onto the streets. Now, at 28, all she had left was her pride and a faint glimmer of hope. Ethan's offer, insane as it was the first real chance she'd had in years to rise again. But the cost: marrying a stranger, a man who saw her as a toy, made her shiver. She pulled out the card again, staring at the phone number. $1.5 million. She muttered, her voice hoarse. That money could help her start over, pay off debts, and support others like her. But in return, she'd be selling 6 months of her life living in the world of a man she couldn't trust. She closed her eyes. Memories of nights sleeping under bridges, and days begging for scraps rising again. She told herself, I had nothing to lose, but her pride still screamed in protest. The next morning, under New York's gray sky, Maya stood before a small cafe in the Flatiron district. She had called Ethan at dawn, her voice trembling but firm. I want to meet, but that doesn't mean I'm agreeing. Ethan, with his usual unwavering confidence, had arranged to meet her there. Maya wore the cleanest clothes she could find from donated bins, a worn sweater and ripped jeans, but still felt out of place among the well-dressed crowd. She smoothed her curly hair, trying to hide her unease. Ethan arrived on time, stepping out of a sleek black Bentley. He wore a charcoal gray suit, polished leather shoes, and eyes as cold as the night before. He looked Maya up and down, without hiding his judgment. You came, he said, voice low but pleased. You might change your mind. I haven't agreed to anything, Maya replied, arms crossed, eyes defiant. I want to hear you out. What is this? Why me? Ethan gestured for her to go inside. They sat in a secluded corner where the light from the window illuminated his chiseled features. A waitress brought coffee, but Maya didn't touch hers. She stared directly at Ethan, waiting. As I said, Ethan began, his tone flat, like laying out a business deal. I need you for a project. It's a fake marriage, 6 months. You'll live in my home and be provided everything: clothes, food, shelter. I have a team to help you. Adapt to my world. After 6 months, we divorce. You receive $1.5 million and we go our separate ways. Maya frowned, feeling like she was hearing the plot of a bad movie. Adapt. Do you mean to turn me into some doll for your high society crowd? And why you have money and power? What could you possibly need from someone like me? Ethan took a sip of coffee, eyes never leaving hers. You don't need to know the reason. Just know I always finish what I start. And I chose you because you were there, and you seemed strong enough to do it. His words felt like a slap. Maya clenched her fists under the table, fighting the rising anger. Do you think I'm something to experiment with? A game for your amusement? Ethan shrugged, a crooked smile forming. Call it whatever you want, but you can't deny this is a way off the streets. Do you want to keep living like this? Begging for change and sleeping in the cold? His words struck a deep nerve. Maya remembered nights shivering in the rain and the disgusted stares of strangers. But she also remembered her pride, the only thing she had left after losing everything. You know nothing about me, she said, voice low but sharp. And I don't trust you. If I agree, how do I know you'll keep your word? Ethan pulled a phone from his coat and slid it across the table. Call my lawyer. He'll draft the contract outlining every term. You'll have the money and the house and be free after 6 months. I don't joke when it comes to business. Maya looked at the phone and then at Ethan. Something was in his eyes, not kindness, but absolute certainty. like he had calculated every step. She hated that arrogance, but she couldn't deny the allure of his offer. $1.5 million could change everything. She could open an art studio, help others on the street, and reclaim the life she had lost. She said, "Giving me a day to think," pushing the phone back toward him. "And if I agree, you have to promise not to touch me. This is a contract, not romance." Ethan nodded, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "Fine, but you'll see, Maya. My world is hard to resist." That night, Maya returned to her familiar street corner where she usually slept. She lay on a cardboard mat, the streetlight glowing across her thoughtful face. Ethan's business card rested in her hand, a reminder of the crossroads ahead. She thought about her mother who died when Maya was young and used to teach her that pride was something no one could ever take away. But she also thought of the shattered dreams. The paintings she once created were now just memories. Could she trade 6 months to get it all back? The next morning, as dawn broke, Maya stood at a public phone booth. She took a deep breath and dialed Ethan's number. When he answered, her voice was steady. "I agree. But this isn't for you. It's for me." On the other end, Ethan smiled. "Good. I'll send a driver in 1 hour. Get ready, Maya. Your new life begins today." Maya hung up, heart pounding. She looked at the street as if saying goodbye to herself. When the sleek black Bentley arrived, she got in without looking back. Ethan sat in the back seat watching her like a scientist observing a specimen. "Welcome to my world," he said, voice full of smugness. Maya didn't respond. She looked out the window as New York faded behind her. She knew she had just stepped into a dangerous game, but she swore she would not let Ethan control her, whether pawn or player. Maya Johnson would fight to keep herself intact. The Bentley glided smoothly through the streets of Manhattan, neon lights reflecting off the windows, casting blurred streaks across Maya Johnson's face. She sat in the back seat, hands clenched tightly on her lap, trying to mask her unease. Across from her, Ethan Caldwell scrolled through his phone, his expression cold, as if bringing a homeless woman into his world was a routine transaction. Maya glanced at him, trying to detect any sincerity, but all she saw was the arrogant confidence of a man used to control everything. "Where are we going?" Maya asked, her voice dry but steady. She had chosen to step into this game, but that didn't mean she would allow herself to be unquestioningly led. Ethan looked up, a faint smirk on his lips. "A hotel. You need a place to rest and get familiar with new standards. Tomorrow my lawyer will bring the contract, and we'll begin." Maya frowned, feeling like she was being sized up like a commodity. "New standards. Do you mean turning me into something you won't be embarrassed to show off to your friends?" Ethan set his phone down, locking eyes with her. "Exactly. My world has rules, Maya. If you want the $1.5 million, you must learn how to play by them." She turned away, staring out the window, not wanting him to see the anger rising inside her. Rules. That word dragged her back to a time when she had once tried to break into the world of men like Ethan, the world of art galleries, benefactors, and empty promises. But it had all come crashing down, and part of that collapse, she realized, had to do with the man sitting across from her. When the car pulled up in front of a luxury hotel in Midtown, Maya couldn't hide her astonishment. The grand lobby sparkled with marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and uniformed staff bowing to Ethan as if he were royalty. She followed him, feeling like an outsider in her torn clothes. Curious glances from staff and guests made her clench her fists, but she kept her back straight, determined not to show weakness. Ethan led her to a penthouse suite on the top floor, where the glass windows offered a breathtaking view of dazzling New York. The room was enormous, with a bed draped in white silk ebony wood furniture and a bathroom larger than the street corner she used to sleep on. He gestured for her to sit on the sofa, then made a phone call. Within minutes, a hotel staff member arrived with a tray of food, a beef sandwich salad, and a glass of orange juice, along with a fresh set of clothes, a white shirt and black slacks, simple but elegant. "Eat," Ethan said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You'll need strength to begin. These clothes are temporary. Tomorrow my team will handle the rest." Maya looked at the tray, her stomach growling from hunger, but she didn't touch it. She stood arms crossed, eyes sharp. "Before I do anything, I want the truth. Why did you choose me? And don't tell me it's because I was there." "You're not the kind of man who acts randomly." Ethan leaned against the desk, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "You're smarter than I thought. Fine. I chose you because you looked desperate enough to say yes, but strong enough not to break. I need someone who can handle the pressure of this world." His words cut like a knife. Maya felt heat rise in her face, but she restrained herself. Desperate, she repeated, her voice low and dangerous. "You think you know me, don't you? Can you buy me a new car?" Ethan shrugged, unfazed. "I'm not buying you. I'm offering you a chance. You can walk away and return to the sidewalk anytime you want." Maya stayed silent, her eyes fixed on him. And then, like lightning, a memory surged forward, sharp and painful. 5 years ago, in an interview room at Caldwell Enterprises, she had stood before Ethan Caldwell. She was 23, wearing the best dress she could borrow, clutching her resume. She had spent weeks preparing, hoping to land a position as an assistant in the public relations department. But Ethan, with the same cold eyes he had now had, flipped through her resume and said, "You're not qualified. We don't need dreamy failures here." Those words, along with his condescending smirk, had crushed her confidence. She had walked out of that interview in tears. From there, her life spiraled. She stared at Ethan, heart pounding. "You don't remember me, do you?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Ethan frowned, clearly caught off guard. "Remember you? Should I?" Maya stepped closer, eyes locked on his. "5 years ago, I interviewed at your company. You insulted me. You called me a failure. Do you have any idea how that destroyed me?" Ethan was silent, his gaze drifting over her face, as if rummaging through forgotten files. Finally, he shook his head. "I interviewed dozens of people every month. I don't remember them all. If I said something, it was just business. Just business." Maya let out a bitter laugh. "Maybe for you. But it was the moment I lost all faith in myself. And now, here you are asking me to marry you like I'm something you can fix." For the first time, Ethan seemed uneasy. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but Maya raised her hand to stop him. "Don't. I don't want an apology. I agreed to this deal, but not for you. I'm doing this to take back my life. And you'd better keep your word, because if you deceive me, I'll make you regret it." She turned away, sat on the sofa, and began to eat, not out of desire, but because she needed strength for what lay ahead. Ethan stood there watching her, an unfamiliar feeling creeping over him. He was used to control, but with her fierce eyes and defiant tone, Maya Johnson wasn't like anyone he had ever encountered. That night, lying on the soft silk sheets of the hotel suite, Maya couldn't sleep. The light from the city filtered through the curtains, casting soft glows across her face. She thought of her mother, who once said, "You can lose everything but never lose your pride." But was pride enough to get her through the next 6 months? She thought of Ethan, of his cruelty in the past, and his arrogance now. She wondered whether he genuinely didn't remember her, or if he was pretending to keep playing his game. Downstairs, Ethan sat at the hotel bar, a glass of whiskey in his hand. Maya's words about the old interview unsettled him. He tried to recall, but her face blurred among the hundreds of applicants he had seen. and yet her eyes full of hurt but unyielding stuck with him. For the first time, he wondered if this bet was as simple as he'd thought. Maya closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. She knew she had entered a dangerous world where Ethan Caldwell held all the power, but she swore she wouldn't let him destroy her again. Whether pawn or player, Maya Johnson would find a way to win. Morning light slipped through the white silk curtains, casting a soft golden hue over the hotel suite. Maya Johnson woke up, her body aching from the contrast between nights spent on the sidewalk and now adjusting to a soft, luxurious bed. She sat up, glancing around the lavish room, feeling as if she were living inside a dream or a nightmare. Today, she would officially step into Ethan Caldwell's world, where she knew she didn't belong. However, her determination to reclaim her life led her to agree, and she swore she wouldn't let Ethan control her. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. A hotel staff member, a middle-aged woman with a polite smile, entered, pushing a cart full of clothes and a breakfast tray, croissants, fresh fruit, and aromatic coffee. The woman said, "Mr. Caldwell asked that you prepare for the 10 o'clock meeting evenly. These are your clothes for today." Maya looked at the clothes, a navy blue midi dress, black high heels, and a silk coat. It was exquisitely tailored from brands she had only ever seen in magazines. She nodded, thanked the woman, and stood. As she tried on the dress, the feel of silk hugging her body made her uneasy. It was too perfect, too foreign, like she was putting on someone else's skin. At precisely 10 a.m., Ethan appeared at the suite, sharp as ever, in a dark gray suit. He looked Maya over from head to toe, not bothering to hide his appraisal. "You look decent," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "But we have a lot of work ahead." Maya crossed her arms, eyes defiant. "Decent. If you want me to be your doll, say it. I'm not here to please you." Ethan smirked, but didn't respond to the jab. "Today you'll sign the contract and meet my team. They'll help you integrate. Let's go." They left the hotel and entered the familiar Bentley. Ethan took Maya to a law office in downtown Manhattan, where an older man, Mr. Richard Hayes, awaited them. Mr. Hayes laid out a thick stack of documents explaining the terms of the fake marriage. Maya would live in Ethan's estate, attend social events as his wife, and receive $1.5 million after 6 months. There would be no emotional attachment and no physical intimacy, and both would divorce at the end of the term. Maya read every line carefully, ensuring there were no loopholes. She signed her name, feeling as though she had sold a piece of her soul. The wedding ceremony occurred immediately afterward, at the courthouse, cold and brief. Only Mr. Hayes and Ethan's driver stood as witnesses. A chill ran down Maya's spine when the judge declared them husband and wife. She looked at Ethan, still wearing that impassive expression, and wondered just how grave a mistake she had made. That afternoon, Maya was brought to Ethan's mansion on the Upper East Side, a 3-story residence with wrought iron gates and meticulously trimmed gardens. The decor was modern, polished hardwood floors, abstract art on the walls, and shimmering chandeliers. A whole staff from butlers to chefs bowed as Ethan entered. Maya could feel curious glances brushing over her, some laced with quiet disdain. She clenched her fists, determined not to show weakness. Ethan led her to a room on the 2nd floor, prepared specifically for her. It was spacious, with a king-sized bed, a wardrobe filled with dresses, and a window overlooking the park. "This is where you'll stay," he said. "Tomorrow my team will start working with you. Clothing, mannerisms, conversation, you must learn it all, not to embarrass me." Maya turned to him, eyes sharp. "Embarrass you? You're worried I'll make you look bad in front of your high society friends? Or are you afraid I'll remind you of what you did to me 5 years ago?" Ethan froze, a flicker of irritation in his eyes. "You're still hung up on that interview I told you. I don't remember. And if you want to succeed in this world, you must let it go. Let it go." Maya stepped closer, her voice trembling with rage. "You called me a failure, Ethan. You destroyed my confidence and pushed me onto a path I never wanted. And now you stand here asking me to play your wife like nothing ever happened." Ethan was silent, his gaze faltering for the first time. He opened his mouth, then closed it again, as if unable to find the words. At last he said quietly, "I can't change the past, but I'm giving you a chance to change the future. Do you want to take it, or keep living in bitterness?" Maya turned away, not wanting him to see the tears in her eyes. She knew he was partially correct. She needed this opportunity. But the fact that Ethan didn't remember her or acknowledge the damage he'd caused made her feel like a ghost in his world. The following days were a whirlwind of transformation. A team of experts hired by Ethan began working with Maya, a fashion stylist, an etiquette coach, and a communications specialist. They measured her body, selected designer dresses from Dior to Chanel, taught her how to walk, hold a wine glass, and answer tricky questions at elite dinners. Maya, though reluctant, adapted quickly. She learned to walk in heels without stumbling, smile politely even when insulted, and stay composed under judgmental eyes' scrutiny. But not everyone welcomed her. During a fitting session, a young fashion assistant named Vanessa whispered to a colleague, "She thinks wearing a lovely dress makes her a lady. Someone like her doesn't belong here." Maya heard it. Though her chest tightened, she turned around, her eyes like ice. "You're right. I don't belong here. But I'll make damn sure none of you forget me." Vanessa flushed red, stammering an apology, but Maya didn't care. She knew prejudice would always exist, not just because of her background, but because of her skin. In Ethan's world, where most faces were white, she was an exception and intended to use that fact to prove her worth. Ethan invited Maya to dine in the mansion's grand dining room one evening. The long table was adorned with candles and flowers, but the distance between them, he at one end, she at the other, symbolized the emotional chasm. Dressed in a sleek black silk gown, Maya felt uneasy under his steady gaze. He said, "You're improving faster than I expected," cutting into his steak. "But there's still a lot to learn. This weekend we'll attend a charity gala. It'll be your first test." Maya took a sip of wine, trying to steady her voice. "Test? You still think this is a game, don't you? I'm not your puppet, Ethan." Ethan put his knife down, his eyes locking onto hers. "This isn't a game. It's a contract. You want the money, I want results. If you can't deliver, we both lose." Maya stared at him, a mix of anger and old wounds rising to the surface. She wanted to scream at him, remind him of the scars he had left in the past. But she knew doing so would only make her look weak. Instead, she stood, placing her napkin on the table. "I'll do better than you expect, but not to please you. I'm doing this for me." She left the dining room, leaving Ethan alone in the flickering candlelight. He watched her go, a strange feeling stirring inside him. Maya Johnson wasn't like anyone he'd ever met. She didn't cower. She didn't beg. And her eyes, resolute and wounded, made him begin to wonder if he truly controlled this game at all. Ethan Caldwell's mansion, with its white walls and towering windows, looked like an impenetrable palace under the moonlight. But inside, the tension between Maya Johnson and Ethan had grown heavier by the day, like a storm silently forming. 2 weeks had passed since Maya entered his world, and though she had adapted to etiquette lessons, designer gowns, and judgmental gazes, her heart remained doubtful. Ethan, unchanged in his arrogance, still seemed to view her as a project to be completed. But Maya never forgot why she was here. 1. $5 million, and a chance to reclaim her life. That evening, Maya stood before the mirror in her private room, adjusting a dark blue silk dress for the charity gala Ethan had mentioned. She looked at her reflection, a woman with neatly curled hair and defiant brown eyes, and wondered if she truly belonged to this world. She had learned to smile politely to navigate high society chatter, but still felt like an imposter. Yet she reminded herself, just 6 months. I can do this. Ethan knocked, entering without waiting for a reply. He wore a black tuxedo, radiating power and charisma. Are you ready? He asked, his gaze scanning her, not with admiration, but as if inspecting a finished product. Maya turned to him, arms crossed. Ready to impress you? Or are you prepared to endure the contempt in your friend's eyes? Ethan frowned slightly, then smirked. You're too sensitive, Maya. The people tonight don't care who you are. They care how you look and what you say. Do well, and no one will dare look down on you. Maya didn't answer, but suspicion bloomed in her chest. She could feel it. There was something Ethan was hiding, and she was determined to find out. The charity gala occurred at a luxurious hotel in the heart of Manhattan, where crystal chandeliers shimmered and violin music filled the air. Maya entered beside Ethan, feeling dozens of eyes turn her way. She stood tall and smiled as trained, but the whispers were impossible to ignore. Who is she? Caldwell's new wife. Really? She doesn't look like she belongs here. Maya gripped her wine glass tightly, trying not to let the hurt show. Ethan, seemingly oblivious to her tension, introduced her to business partners and philanthropists. She answered questions intelligently, surprising some with her knowledge of art and culture. But when an older woman, Eleanor Grayson, asked, "How did you and Ethan meet, Ms. Johnson?" Maya hesitated. Ethan quickly stepped in, voice smooth. A fateful encounter. Maya is a hidden gem I was lucky to find. Maya looked at him, feeling an invisible blade pierce her chest. A hidden gem. She knew he was performing, but the dishonesty in his words made her feel like a decorative object. She excused herself, stepping onto the balcony to breathe. Under the moonlight, she wondered if she could keep pretending for 6 more months. Late that night, back at the mansion, Maya couldn't sleep. She wandered the quiet hallways, the soft wall lights casting shadows across her pensive face. She paused at the slightly ajar door of Ethan's study, light from a laptop screen spilling into the hallway. Curious, heart pounding, she stepped in. On the desk sat an open laptop displaying an email thread between Ethan and someone named James Harper. She sat scrolling through the messages, and her heart nearly stopped. An email from James read, "Has she agreed yet? I bet $3 million you can't turn a homeless woman into a high society lady." Ethan had replied, "She agreed. It's only a matter of time before I win." Another message just days ago chilled her to the bone. "She's stubborn, but I'll make her perfect. Your $3 million is as good as mine." Maya's blood boiled. She wasn't a hidden gem or a wife. She was a pawn in Ethan's game. A bet. A wager he made to brag to his friends. This betrayal hurt more than the insult during that interview years ago. Hands shaking, she printed the emails, then stormed out of the office, not caring if Ethan heard. She confronted him in her room as he returned from a phone call. She threw the printed emails on the table, her voice trembling with fury. "What is this, Ethan? A bet. You lied to me, turned me into a joke for you and your friends." Ethan looked at the pages, his face hardening. He stepped forward, voice low and tense. "Maya, listen to me. It's not what you think, not what I think." Maya shouted, tears streaming down her face. "You used me, Ethan. You made me believe this was a chance, but I was just a prize in your twisted game. Do you even understand how humiliating this is?" Ethan reached out as if to touch her, but she stepped back. "Maya, yes, there was a bet, but things have changed." "I don't." She cut him off, her voice sharp as glass. "I don't want your excuses. I trusted you even just a little. That was my biggest mistake." She turned, ran up the stairs, and locked her door. In the darkness, she curled up on the floor, heart shattered. She had hoped foolishly that Ethan might be genuine, but now all she felt was foolish and broken. That night, while the mansion slept, Maya made a decision. She couldn't stay. She couldn't be part of this game anymore. She changed into her old clothes, a worn sweater and jeans, and stuffed a few belongings into a small bag. Opening her window, she climbed down the ivy-covered wall, careful not to make a sound. As her feet touched the ground, she looked back at the mansion one last time, heart heavy. She wanted to scream to make Ethan feel the pain he caused, but instead she turned and ran into the darkness. Maya wandered the streets of New York, the night cold against her skin. She had no destination, only the need to escape Ethan and the humiliation. But as dawn broke, her body gave out. She collapsed onto a park bench, mind in a fog. Memories of her past. The interview. The hunger. The shame fused with her present anguish. She held herself tightly, feeling like her world was crumbling. Meanwhile, Ethan realized Maya was gone at the mansion when the butler reported she hadn't shown up for breakfast. He ran to her room and saw the open window and marks on the ivy. She left. He whispered, a rare panic rising in his chest. He pulled out his phone and called contacts, issuing a search for Maya. But deep down, he knew. This wasn't about the bet anymore. Maya had made him feel something. Something he didn't yet have the words for. Dawn cast a pale light over New York, but the air was as heavy as the calm before the storm inside Ethan Caldwell's mansion. Ethan stood in Maya's room, his eyes fixed on the wide-open window and the ivy vines disturbed by her escape. The bed was untouched, the designer clothes still hanging in the wardrobe, yet Maya was gone. And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt a nameless fear squeezing his chest. It wasn't fear of losing the bet. It was fear of losing something he hadn't yet found the words to name. He turned to Helen, the housekeeper, standing at the door with a worried look. "Did you see her last night?" Ethan asked urgently, his tone far from the composed man he usually was. "No, sir," Helen replied softly. "I thought she just needed space after the argument." Ethan clenched his fists, memories of last night flashing in his mind. Maya, eyes red, voice trembling with fury, had thrown the printed emails about the bet onto his desk. He had tried to explain, but she wouldn't listen. She had called him a liar. And now she was gone. He rushed to his office, grabbed his phone, and called security. His voice was sharp, but panic crept through. "Find her. Check every park, train station, and street corner in the city. I want her found. Now." But as soon as he hung up, Ethan sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Maya's voice echoed in his memory. Her pain, her anger. She had spoken of that interview 5 years ago, how he had destroyed her confidence. And now, through this bet, he had betrayed her all over again. He'd always believed he was in control of business people, even emotions. But Maya Johnson had broken through that wall. She wasn't just a pawn. She was scarred by things he had carelessly or cruelly caused. Meanwhile, Maya dragged her steps through the streets of New York, her legs trembling with exhaustion. Her old clothes, a worn sweater and dusty jeans, clung to her body, and the morning chill bit into her skin. She had walked for hours with no destination, just needing to get far away from Ethan and the humiliation of the bet. But now, her body was giving in. Her head spun. Her stomach ached with hunger, and a feverish chill spread through her limbs. She collapsed onto a bench in Battery Park, curling up, her vision dimming. She watched people pass, rushing commuters with coffee and briefcases, children chasing their parents, and felt invisible. She had hoped, even just a little, that Ethan might be different from the man who humiliated her all those years ago. But those emails had shattered that illusion. How stupid was I to trust him? she muttered. Tears streamed down her face, but she wiped them away quickly. She couldn't afford weakness, not now. She thought of her mother, who had taught her that pride was the one thing no one could take away. But that pride now felt too fragile to keep her standing. Should she go back and confront Ethan, or keep running, even if there was nowhere left to go? She closed her eyes, letting the cold wind wash over her, and felt her body begin to fade. On the other side of the city, Ethan sat behind the wheel of his Bentley, driving street by street. He had refused to let his security team search alone. He needed to find Maya himself and safe. He didn't understand why it mattered so much. The bet with James was now a distant memory, a stupid mistake he wished he'd never made. He kept seeing her eyes during their confrontation, angry and deeply hurt. He had hurt her not once, but twice. And that thought made him feel like an absolute failure. He stopped at every park, every corner, questioning people experiencing homelessness and street vendors. No one had seen her. As the sun rose higher, he reached Battery Park, knowing it was a common refuge for the unhoused. And then he saw her, a small figure curled up on a bench, arms wrapped around herself. Her hair was tangled, her face pale, and she was shivering with fever. Maya, Ethan called, running to her. He knelt beside her, touching her shoulder, but she weakly pushed him away. "Don't touch me," she whispered, her voice hoarse and eyes unfocused. Ethan ignored her resistance. He removed his coat and wrapped it around her, feeling her ice-cold skin. "I'm taking you to the hospital," he said firmly, his voice trembling with concern. "You can't stay out here like this. I don't need you," Maya murmured, barely audible. She tried to stand, but her knees buckled. Ethan caught her before she fell, lifting her into his arms, despite her faint protest. He placed her in the back seat and ordered the driver to rush to the nearest hospital. In the ER, doctors confirmed Maya was suffering from exhaustion, dehydration, and a high fever. They administered IV fluids and instructed her to rest. Ethan sat beside her hospital bed, eyes never leaving her pale face. She had fallen asleep, her breathing shallow. At that moment, Ethan felt a pain he had never known before. He thought of everything she had said, the interview, the bet, the humiliation, and realized he had caused wounds deeper than he ever imagined. He took out his phone and sent a single text to James. "The bet is over. I don't want your money." He didn't wait for a reply. He shut off his phone and turned back to Maya. He knew that an apology would never be enough, but for the first time he truly wanted to become someone better, not for the game, but for her. When Maya opened her eyes, the white light of the hospital made her blink. She saw Ethan sitting there, his eyes tired but unwavering. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice weak but still sharp. Ethan lowered his head, hands clenched. "Because I was wrong, and because I don't want to lose you." Maya let out a bitter laugh. "Lose me? You never had me, Ethan. I was just part of your game." Ethan looked at her, and for the first time sincerity filled his gaze. "There's no game anymore, Maya. I ended the bet. I want you to be safe." Maya turned away, unwilling to believe him. But deep inside, she sensed something had shifted in his voice, something she hadn't heard before. She closed her eyes, letting exhaustion pull her back into sleep, unaware that this moment would forever change them. The cold white light of the hospital bathed the small room where Maya Johnson lay in bed. Her body was still weak, but her eyes had regained a trace of sharpness. The IV dripped steadily, and the soft beeping of the heart monitor pulsed like the quiet rhythm of life. She gazed out the window, where the New York sky was shifting from gray to pale blue, trying to piece together the emotional wreckage inside her. Last night, she had run from Ethan Caldwell, from the betrayal of that cruel bet, only to end up here with him sitting beside her, his eyes heavy with exhaustion, and something she had never seen before: remorse. Ethan was still in the stiff plastic chair, his gray suit now wrinkled after a sleepless night. He looked at Maya without speaking, but his silence carried an unusual weight. Maya turned to him, her eyes cold. "You're still here," she said, her voice raspy but sharp. "I told you to leave." Ethan lowered his head, hands clenched on his lap. "I can't," he replied, his voice low but steady. "Not after everything that happened. Maya, I was wrong. I need you to hear me." Maya let out a laugh, dry and joyless. "Hear you? So you can spin more lies? Do you think a few sorry words will erase the fact that you made me a joke?" She sat up despite her aching body, eyes burning. "You humiliated me 5 years ago, and now you did it again. I don't need your pity, Ethan." Ethan didn't look away. He took a deep breath, as if summoning all his courage. "I don't remember that interview," he said sincerely. "But I don't deny what you said. I've been cruel not just to you, but to many others. I bet. It was a stupid mistake. I've canceled it, Maya. I don't want James's money. I want to make things right." Maya studied him, searching for any sign of deception, but his gaze didn't waver. She turned away, her heart in turmoil. Part of her wanted to believe him, to believe that people could change. But another part, the one that had endured too much, screamed that this was another tactic. "Make things right," she echoed bitterly. "Do you think words are enough? You don't understand, Ethan. You don't know what it feels like to be treated like garbage, to be made invisible." Ethan stayed silent. Her words cut deep. He thought of his past and how his father taught him that emotions were weakness and that people were tools to use. But Maya, with her pride and resilience, had made him look into the mirror and see a man he didn't like. "I don't expect your forgiveness," he said quietly, "but I'll prove I can be different. Give me a chance, Maya. Not for me, for yourself." Maya didn't respond. She lay back down, closed her eyes, and let exhaustion pull her into silence. Ethan stood up, leaving a new business card on the table this time, with his lawyer's number and a note saying she could contact them any time if she wanted to go. "You don't have to stay if you don't want to," he said before exiting. "But I won't give up." 2 days later, doctors discharged Maya with orders to rest and eat properly. She didn't want to return to Ethan's mansion, but had nowhere else to go. Maya felt a heavy reluctance when the black Bentley stopped before the wrought iron gate. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning the perfectly trimmed garden and the cold white walls. Ethan walked beside her, keeping his distance, as if afraid to make her uncomfortable. He led her to her old room, where everything remained just as she left it, except for one change. A corner of the room had been turned into a small art studio, complete with an easel, oil paints, and a full set of brushes. Maya paused, her eyes drifting over the colors, her fingers instinctively touching one of the brushes. She had once been an artist, once found freedom in her strokes, but she hadn't touched a brush in years. "I heard you used to paint," Ethan said gently. "I thought you'd want to try again. This isn't to buy your forgiveness. I just wanted you to have something of your own." Maya turned to him, eyes filled with skepticism and an unnamed emotion. "You think an art studio will make me forget everything?" she asked, but her tone had lost some of its previous sharpness. "No," Ethan replied, "but I hope it helps you feel a little less trapped." She said nothing, just gave a slight nod and turned away. Ethan left the room, leaving her alone with her thoughts. Maya sat before the easel, picked up a brush, and felt a faint flicker of light inside her heart for the first time in years. In the days that followed, Ethan began changing how he treated Maya. He no longer gave orders or assessed her like a project. Instead, he asked her opinion on meals, let her choose her clothes, and avoided mentioning the bet or high society. One afternoon, he invited her to a homeless shelter in Brooklyn, not to flaunt charity, but to learn how he could help. At the center, Maya met people like her, men and women cast aside by society, but still clinging to hope. She spoke with an older woman named Ruth, who shared how she lost her home after a serious illness. Maya listened, held Ruth's hand, and felt a connection she hadn't felt in a long time. Ethan stood at a distance watching, not seeing Maya as a project, but as a woman with a vast, compassionate heart. On the way back, Ethan broke the silence. "You're good with them," he said genuinely. "I've never thought of people like that. As individuals with stories. You make me see things differently." Maya looked at him, her eyes still cautious. "Don't say pretty words, Ethan. If you want to change, do it. Don't just talk." Ethan nodded, accepting her challenge. "I will," he said, and his voice carried a new determination this time. That night in her room, Maya began to paint. She sketched a rainy New York street with a lone figure standing beneath a lamplight. The painting wasn't just a memory of nights spent on sidewalks. It was her way of confronting her pain. When she set the brush down, she looked at the canvas and felt something release inside her. Downstairs, Ethan sat in his study eyes on an old photo of his mother, the only person who had ever taught him compassion before she passed. He thought of Maya, of how she had shattered his beliefs and forced him to change. He knew redemption wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, he wanted to try, not for pride power or even for Maya's approval, but because he genuinely wanted to become a better man. The early summer sunlight filtered through the branches in the garden of Ethan Caldwell's estate, casting a gentle golden hue over the rose bushes. Maya Johnson stood by the window of her room, a paintbrush in hand, her eyes drifting over the unfinished canvas on her easel, a misty New York street where she had once wandered. 2 weeks had passed since she returned to the estate after running away, and though the wound from the bet still lingered, she couldn't deny that Ethan was trying to change. However, for Maya, trust was not something easily rebuilt. From the hallway, Ethan knocked gently. "Maya, are you free?" He asked, his voice deep, but no longer commanding, as it once had been. He wore a simple white shirt, sleeves rolled up, a noticeable shift from his usual stiff suits. Maya set down the brush and turned around. "That depends on what you want," she replied, her gaze still slightly guarded. Ethan gave a small smile, lacking his usual arrogance. "I want to take you somewhere. It's not a party or any event. It's just something you might care about." Maya frowned, curious but still suspicious. "Where?" "A women's support center in Harlem," Ethan said. "I got in touch with them after our trip to Brooklyn. They need help, and I thought you might want to be involved." Maya fell silent, considering. She remembered the Brooklyn Center visit and how women like Ruth touched her heart. She nodded, her voice low. "All right. But don't expect me to thank you." Ethan nodded without protest. "I'll wait for you downstairs." Harlem's Women's Support Center was a small but warm building, its walls adorned with colorful murals and children's laughter echoing from the backyard. Maya and Ethan were greeted by Mrs. Angela, the center's director, an older black woman with a radiant smile. "Thank you both for coming," Mrs. Angela said, clasping Maya's hand. "We need support, especially for our vocational training programs." Maya listened as Mrs. Angela shared stories of the women at the center, those who had been homeless, fled domestic violence, or struggled to raise their children. She felt a deep connection, as if their stories were part of her own. As Mrs. Angela led them through the sewing and computer classes, Maya stopped by a young woman around 19, who focused intently on a sewing machine. The girl named Sarah looked up with anxious eyes. "What are you working on?" Maya asked, sitting beside her. Sarah hesitated, then replied, I'm trying to learn sewing so I can get a job. I have a son and don't want him to grow up like I did." Maya smiled, placing a hand on Sarah's shoulder. You're doing great. I was once in your place not knowing where I'd end up, but you're stronger than you think. Sarah looked at her, her eyes lighting up. You really were like me? Maya nodded, her voice soft. Yes, and I'm trying to get back up. You will too. Watching from a distance, Ethan saw how Maya connected with Sarah and how she was inspired without trying. He walked over and knelt at Sarah's level. What do you need to keep learning? He asked sincerely. Sarah looked unsure. I need a sewing machine at home to practice, but I don't have the money. Ethan nodded. I'll take care of that. And if you'd like, I can sponsor a vocational course for you. Sarah's eyes widened, tears rolling down her cheeks. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Maya looked at Ethan, her expression a mix of surprise and doubt. She hadn't expected him to step in so directly, and the sincerity in his voice unsettled her. On the drive home, she broke the silence. Why did you do that? To make me think you're a good person. Ethan looked at her, his gaze unwavering. No, I did it because you showed me that people like Sarah deserve help. I never thought about them before Maya. You've changed the way I see the world. Maya turned away, not wanting him to see the emotions stirring inside her. She still didn't fully trust him, but what he'd done today didn't feel like an act. That evening, back at the estate, Maya sat in her studio sketching an image of Sarah at her sewing machine. The painting carried a new energy, not the pain of the past, but hope for the future. She heard a knock, and Ethan stepped in holding a tea tray. He said he wanted something to drink, and he said he wanted the tray on the table. Maya looked at him, her gaze softening slightly. You didn't have to do that. I'm not a guest. I know, Ethan replied, sitting A. He said you step away. But I wanted to. If you're willing to listen, I want to talk about my past. Maya frowned, but nodded. Ethan took a deep breath, his eyes distant. My mother died when I was 10. She was the only one who taught me about kindness, but my father turned me into a machine after she passed. He said emotions were weakness, that I had to control everything to succeed. I grew up thinking people were just tools, and I lived that way. Until I met you. Maya stayed silent, his words touching something deep within her. She thought of her mother, who had also taught her about kindness before she died. You think telling me this will make me forgive you? She asked quietly. No, Ethan said. I want you to understand why I was that person, and why I want to change. Maya looked at him, her heart torn between doubt and a flicker of hope. She stood and turned back to the painting. If you want to change, keep doing what you did today. Words aren't enough, Ethan. Ethan nodded, rising to leave the room. I will, he said with quiet determination. In the following days, Ethan continued to back up his words with actions. He worked with the Harlem Center to fund sewing machines and scholarships for Sarah and others. He invited Maya to join meetings and asked for her input on ways to support the community. Though still guarded, Maya began to notice a change in him, not just in words, but in deeds. He no longer gave orders or treated her like a project. He listened, unsettling her. If Ethan truly changed, she would have to confront her feeling something she wasn't ready for. One evening, as Maya finished Sarah's painting, she hung it on the studio wall. She looked at the canvas, feeling like a part of her had healed. She heard footsteps, and Ethan appeared at the door, his eyes landing on the painting. It's beautiful, he said sincerely. You're talented, Maya. Maya turned to him, her gaze soft. Thank you, she said for the first time, without a defensive tone. And thank you for today, for Sarah. Ethan smiled a smile free of arrogance. You don't need to thank me. I'm just doing what's right. As he walked away, Maya stood alone, her heart conflicted. She knew trust couldn't be built overnight, but for the first time, she felt that maybe, just maybe, Ethan Caldwell wasn't her enemy. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the garden of Ethan Caldwell's estate, where the rose bushes swayed gently in the breeze. Maya Johnson sat in the art studio, a brush in hand, but her gaze was lost in the distance. The painting before her, a Harlem street at sunset, filled with bustling silhouettes, no longer inspired her. A month had passed since she returned to the estate after running away. Though Ethan had proven his transformation through action, Maya still felt an invisible barrier that kept her from trusting him completely. The bet, though canceled, had left a scar in her heart. Ethan stepped in, knocking lightly to announce himself. He wore a dark blue polo shirt, a rare display of simplicity, and his eyes carried a hint of hesitation. "Maya, can I talk to you for a moment?" he asked, his voice low. Maya set the brush down and turned to face him. "What is it?" she replied, not coldly, but still guarded. Ethan stepped inside, hands in his pockets. "I invite you to a meeting this afternoon at the Harlem Center. They plan to expand their vocational programs, and your input would be valuable." Maya frowned, her eyes scanning his face, searching for signs of pretense. But all she saw was sincerity, something she had started to recognize in him over the past few weeks. She nodded. "All right, I'll go." Ethan gave a slight smile, but before leaving he paused. "Are you okay? You've seemed deep in thought lately." Maya was caught off guard by the question. She wanted to say she wasn't okay, that she was still struggling with past pain and her doubts about him. But instead she said, "I'm fine. I need time." Ethan nodded, not pushing further. "I understand. Take your time, Maya." He left the room, leaving her alone with her thoughts. The meeting at the Harlem Center was lively, with Mrs. Angela and the volunteers discussing the expansion of training programs. Maya offered suggestions about adding art classes and drawing from her experience, and she was met with enthusiastic support. Ethan sat beside her, listening attentively, occasionally taking notes. She noticed that he didn't try to take control of the meeting like a boss. He let others speak freely. This change made her uneasy. If Ethan truly were becoming someone different, she would have to confront her feelings, something she wasn't ready for. After the meeting, as Maya and Ethan prepared to leave, a voice rang out from the doorway. "Ethan, long time. No see." Maya turned, her heart clenched as she saw James Harper, who initiated the bet. He stepped inside with tousled brown hair, a mischievous smile, and eyes gleaming with mockery. And this must be the new wife, right? Ethan froze. His expression darkened. "James, what are you doing here?" he asked, the tension in his voice. James shrugged his eyes, sweeping over Maya like he was assessing her. "I heard you were doing charity work, so I'm dropping by. But I have to say, Ethan, well done. Turning someone like her into a lady of class, I almost want to raise the stakes." Maya felt heat rush to her face. James's words were like knives reopening the wound from the bet. She clenched her fists, eyes burning. Ethan stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "That's enough, James. The bet is over. I told you already." James laughed, completely unfazed. "Over? Are you serious? You got halfway through it, Ethan. Don't tell me you've actually fallen for her." Maya couldn't take it anymore. She walked out of the room, her heart pounding. But instead of running away, she stood in the hallway, listening through the slightly ajar door. She needed to know the truth, and what Ethan would say when she wasn't in the room. Inside, Ethan faced James, his voice sharp and cold. "You don't understand anything, James. Maya isn't part of some game. She's human, and I was wrong to agree to that bet. I canceled it, and I don't want your money. Now leave before I lose my patience." James raised his brows, suspicion in his eyes. "You're fooling yourself, Ethan. But fine, if you want to play the hero, go ahead. Just don't cry when it all falls apart." When James left, Maya stepped back into the room, her eyes locked on Ethan. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "Did you cancel the bet? Or is this just another performance that makes me stay?" Ethan looked at her, his gaze unwavering. "It's true, Maya. I sent the money back to James last week. I don't want anything to do with that bet anymore. I want you to stay because of your identity, not some game." Maya clenched her fists, tears rising in her eyes, but she held them back. "Why should I believe you? After everything you've done, after how you treated me. Why?" Ethan stepped closer, but paused when she took a step back. "I don't expect you to trust me immediately," he said, voice steady. "But I'll prove it. I was wrong, Maya, and I'll spend my life making it right, if you'll let me." Maya said nothing, her heart in turmoil. She remembered the days on the street when all she had left was her pride. She remembered recent moments, Ethan listening to her, helping Sarah, treating her like a person, not a project. But the memory of the bet still haunted her like a ghost, making her afraid to trust him. She took a deep breath, her gaze sharp. "I'll give you one last chance, Ethan. But if I catch even one lie, no matter how small, I'll leave and never return. Do you understand?" Ethan nodded, his eyes filled with a new resolve. "I understand. And I won't let you down." Neither of them spoke on the drive back to the estate, but the air inside the car no longer felt as heavy. Maya stared out the window, thinking about the decision she had just made. She knew this was a gamble, not Ethan's, but hers. Trusting him was a leap, and she wasn't sure she was ready. But part of her, the part that longed for hope, wanted to believe that people could change. That night in the art studio, Maya began a new painting, a portrait of Sarah, her eyes glowing with hope. She painted not to forget the past, but to remind herself that she could still believe in the future. She heard a knock at the door. When she set the brush down, Ethan stood there holding a cup of hot tea. "I thought you might want a drink," he said softly. Maya accepted the cup, her gaze softening. "Thank you," she said, this time without defensiveness. Ethan smiled, then quietly walked away, leaving her alone with the painting and her thoughts. In his room, Ethan sat down, looking at an old photo of his mother. He thought of Maya, how she had challenged him to improve. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, it felt worth it. The afternoon sun faded along the winding roads of the Adirondack Mountains, where lush pine forests merged with a clear blue sky. Maya Johnson sat by the SUV window, her gaze sweeping the endless rolling hills. She didn't know why Ethan Caldwell had brought her here, to a small village nestled in nature, far from the noise of New York. But after weeks of tension after the bet and James Harper's return, she had agreed to come with him, though an invisible wall still lingered between them. Ethan drove silently, his hands gripping the wheel, eyes focused ahead, but occasionally glancing at Maya. He wore a simple flannel shirt, a notable shift from his usual sleek suits. "You haven't asked where we're going," he said, breaking the silence with a teasing tone. Maya frowned, turning toward him. "I asked 3 times already, Ethan. You only said, 'You'll see.' If this is a joke, I won't find it funny." Ethan smiled this time, without arrogance. "It's not a joke. I want to show you a place that's special to me. A place that reminds me of who I was before I became the man you despise." His words silenced Maya. She turned back to the window, her heart tangled. Over the past weeks, Ethan had shown real change, supporting the Harlem Center and respecting her space. But she was still afraid that if she opened her heart, she'd be hurt again. She took a deep breath, and focused on the landscape outside, where the hills seemed to whisper peace. The car stopped in front of a small wooden house by the lake, its red roof and porch covered in wildflowers. Ethan stepped out, opened the door for Maya, and led her inside. The house was warm but straightforward, with a stone fireplace, worn-out sofas, and family photos on the walls. Maya paused before one picture, a blonde-haired boy around 8, standing beside a white woman with a gentle smile. She instantly recognized Ethan, and the woman had to be his mother. "This is where my mom brought me, every summer," Ethan said softly, standing behind her. "She said this was where we could be no money or status. After she passed, I rarely came back, but I thought, maybe you'd like it here." Maya gently touched the photo frame, her eyes softening. "She looks kind," she said quietly. "She must have been special." Ethan nodded, his gaze distant. "She was the only one who taught me about kindness. But I forgot that. Until I met you." Maya turned, searching his face for sincerity. She wanted to believe him, but the memory of the bet and the humiliation still loomed like ghosts. "Why did you bring me here, Ethan? Do you have a heart too?" Ethan stepped closer, but kept enough distance for her to feel safe. "Not just that. I wanted us to have time to talk without distractions from New York or anyone else. I want you to know who I am, not the man who hurt you." Maya stayed silent, her heart pounding. She followed him to the porch where they sat on wooden chairs overlooking the shimmering lake. Ethan began to speak, his voice filled with rare honesty. He talked about his childhood, how his mother taught him to paint and love nature, and how his father turned him cold after her death. He admitted, "I used money as a shield, eyes fixed on the water. It was easier than facing feelings. But you, Maya, you made me want to face them." Maya listened, her emotions tangled like threads. She thought of herself, the artistic dreams she buried, and her years on the street when she felt invisible. She said, "You don't know how hard it was," her voice trembling. "When you called me a failure 5 years ago, I lost everything. Not just the job, my self-worth. And now you want me to trust you after all that—" Ethan bowed his head, his hands clenched. "I can't change the past, Maya, but I can change what's next. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to try." She looked at him, her eyes full of both pain and hope. "Forgiveness isn't something I can give easily, Ethan. But I see you're trying, and I want to believe people can change." Ethan smiled, a quiet, meaningful smile. He pulled a small necklace from his pocket with a silver sunflower pendant. "This was my mother's," he said, offering it to her. She said, "Sunflowers represent resilience. They always turn toward the light no matter how hard things get. I want you to have it as a reminder that you're stronger than you think." Maya took the necklace, her fingers brushing the pendant. She felt the weight of the gift, not its material value, but its meaning. "Thank you," she said softly with genuine emotion. For the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope that Ethan wasn't just performing. The days that followed in the cabin brought a change of pace. Ethan and Maya hiked trails together, cooked simple meals, and talked about little things from art to childhood dreams. Maya shared stories of her early days as an artist, of the first painting she made for her mother. Ethan listened without interrupting, his gaze full of quiet respect. One evening, they sat on a rock by the lake watching the sunset. Ethan suddenly asked, "If you could start over, what would you do?" Maya thought for a moment, then answered, "I'd open a small gallery, a place for people like me, the forgotten ones, to find hope through art." Ethan nodded, his eyes lighting up. "I'll help you do that if you want. Not to make up for anything, but because I believe you can change people's lives." Maya looked at him, her heart pounding. His words weren't just a promise, but an invitation to enter the future, not as a pawn, but as a partner. She held the sunflower pendant tightly, feeling the wall inside her slowly beginning to crack. When they returned to New York, Maya felt different. She hadn't completely forgiven him, but was ready to give Ethan a real chance. In the car, she turned to him. "I can't promise anything yet, Ethan, but I'll stay, and I'll see what you do next." Ethan smiled, his eyes filled with hope. "That's all I need, Maya." The early morning sunlight filtered through the tree canopy in Ethan Caldwell's estate garden, casting a soft glow on the blooming rose bushes. Maya Johnson stood by the art studio window, her hand tightly clutching the sunflower necklace Ethan had given her in the Adirondacks. With its quiet, honest moments by the lake, that trip had shaken the walls she had built around her heart. She hadn't fully forgiven Ethan, but she couldn't deny that he had changed from an arrogant man who treated her like a pawn to someone who listened and cared. Still, trust was fragile, and Maya feared that she might get hurt if she opened her heart again. Ethan stepped into the studio, knocking gently to signal his presence. He wore a pale blue shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and his eyes showed a new resolve. "Maya, do you have a moment?" he asked, his voice deep but warm. "I want to take you somewhere this afternoon." Maya turned around, her gaze a mix of curiosity and caution. "Another secret trip?" she asked, the corner of her mouth curling into a faint smile. "Where are you taking me this time?" Ethan smiled, his eyes brightening. "Just the backyard. I've prepared something for you. Nothing extravagant, but I think you'll like it." Maya raised an eyebrow, but the sincerity in his voice made her agree. "All right. But don't expect me to be easily swayed." That afternoon, Ethan led Maya to the back garden of the estate, where a small corner had been transformed into a cozy setting. A wooden table covered with a white silk cloth was set with candles and wildflowers. A bouquet of radiant sunflowers sat nearby. Soft violin music is played from a small speaker, blending with the bird song in the garden. Maya paused, surprised by the thoughtfulness of the scene. "What is this, Ethan?" she asked, her tone tinged with suspicion. Ethan stepped to the table and turned to face her. "A dinner just for the two of us," he said. "I wanted to thank you, Maya, for staying, for giving me a chance even when I didn't deserve it." Maya sat down, her eyes drifting across the table before landing on Ethan. She noticed something different. No arrogance, no controlling demeanor. He poured her a glass of wine, his gaze never leaving hers. "You were incredible at the charity event last week," he said sincerely. "People couldn't stop talking about you, but I don't want to talk about them. I want to talk about us." Maya frowned, her heartbeat quickening. "Us? Do you still think there's an us after everything?" Ethan set his glass down, locking eyes with her. "I know I hurt you, Maya. The best is that interview years ago. I can't erase those mistakes. But you made me face myself, and I didn't like who I used to be. I want to improve, not just for you, but for me." Maya stayed silent, his words touching something deep inside her. She thought of the past weeks, how he had helped Sarah at the Harlem Center, listened to her, and respected her space. But fear lingered. "You say that. But how do I know you won't change your mind? How do I know this isn't just another act?" Ethan stood up and walked toward her, then unexpectedly knelt. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a simple silver ring with a small blue stone. He said, "This isn't an expensive diamond ring," his voice slightly trembling. "I chose it because it's the same color as my mother's eyes, the woman who taught me about kindness. Maya Johnson. I don't deserve you, but I love you, not because of a contract or a bet, but because you changed me. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife, not in name but for real?" Maya's eyes widened, and her breath caught. She looked at the ring, then at Ethan, searching for any trace of deceit. But she found only sincerity, vulnerability, and a fragile spark of hope in his eyes. She clutched the sunflower necklace, her heart in turmoil. Ethan, I don't know, she whispered, tears rising. I want to believe you, but I'm scared. I've lost too much already. Ethan nodded, not pushing. I understand, Maya. I'll wait no matter how long it takes. But I want you to know that I'm serious. I love you, and I'll prove it every day. Maya looked at him, emotions swirling like a storm. She thought of the past, the years on the street, the pain from Ethan's cruel words, and the recent moments when he stood beside her in Harlem, when he shared his mother's memory in the Adirondacks. She took a deep breath, then slowly nodded. All right, Ethan, she said, her voice trembling. I'll give us a chance, but this is the last one. If you hurt me again, I won't come back. Ethan smiled, his eyes lighting up like a child's. Gently, he slid the ring onto her finger, his hand trembling as it touched hers. Thank you, Maya, he said, his voice choked. I won't let you down. The wedding took place a week later, right there in the estate's garden. There was no extravagance or high society guest list, only a few close friends, and people from the Harlem Center, like Mrs. Angela and Sarah. Maya wore a simple white silk dress, her natural curls cascading down, and the sunflower necklace glimmering on her chest. In a deep blue suit, Ethan couldn't take his eyes off her. The air was warm and hopeful as they stood before a minister beneath the old oak tree. Maya held Ethan's hand in her vows, her gaze both sincere and steady. Ethan, you hurt me, but showed me that people can change. I promise to stand by you, not just for love, but because we can build something better together. Ethan, his voice shaking, replied, Maya, you've taught me compassion, resilience, and what real love means. I promise to spend my life becoming a man worthy of you. As they kissed, applause rang out from their friends, and for the first time in years, Maya felt like she was exactly where she belonged. Morning sunlight streamed through the silk curtains of Ethan Caldwell's estate, casting a warm golden glow over the living room. A child's laughter echoed from the garden, where Maya Johnson, now Maya Caldwell, played tag with their 3-year-old daughter Ava. With her mother's deep black curls and her father's bright blue eyes, Ava ran across the lawn, holding a red ball. Ethan stood on the porch, a cup of coffee in hand, his eyes full of joy as he watched the two most important people in his life. 4 years had passed since their wedding in that garden, and the once cold mansion now felt like a true home. Maya looked up and met Ethan's gaze. She smiled and called out, Don't just stand there like an older man. Ethan, come play with Ava. Ethan laughed, set down his coffee, and ran into the yard. He scooped Ava up and spun her around, making her giggle uncontrollably. Daddy, chase Mommy, Ava squealed, pointing at Maya. Oh, Mommy's a fast runner, Maya said, pretending to flee as Ethan playfully gave chase. Their laughter mixed with the birdsong, painting a picture of happiness they once thought unreachable. 4 years earlier, wedding Ethan and Maya had built a new life after their meaningful yet straightforward wedding together. They were both husband and wife, and partners in deeply passionate social projects. The Women's Support Center in Harlem, where Maya had first met Sarah, expanded into a network with branches in Brooklyn and Queens. They offered hundreds of women and children vocational training scholarships and shelter, helping them rediscover hope. Sarah, now a skilled seamstress, opened her small shop and became a volunteer at the center, inspiring others in return. Maya had also fulfilled her dream. She opened a small gallery in Harlem called Sunflower, showcasing works by artists who had once been homeless or in crisis. Her paintings of New York streets and emotionally raw portraits captured the art world's attention and raised thousands of dollars for charity. One evening at the gallery's opening, Maya stood before a crowd, the sunflower necklace gleaming at her collarbone, and said, "Art saved me, and I hope it will save others too." Ethan stood in the corner of the room, watching her with open pride. He had changed entirely from the arrogant man who once saw Maya as a pawn. Now he was a philanthropist and a mentor to young entrepreneurs, encouraging them to use their wealth for meaningful impact. He had also learned to express his emotions, no longer using money as a shield. Once when Ava had a fever, he stayed up all night by her side, holding Maya's hand and whispering, "I used to think I couldn't love anyone more than myself. But you and Ava proved me wrong." One morning as Maya was preparing breakfast pancakes with syrup, Ava's favorite, she felt a wave of nausea. Ethan, reading the paper, noticed the change in her face. "Are you okay?" he asked, rising immediately. Maya smiled, her eyes shining. "I think we might be expecting another little one." Ethan's eyes widened, and then he laughed and hugged her tightly. "Really? Maya, that's the best news ever." He kissed her forehead, and together they began planning for the new baby, repainting the nursery and choosing names. As Ava grew older, Maya and Ethan continued expanding their legacy. They created a scholarship fund named after Ethan's mother, supporting children from underprivileged communities in pursuing art and education. Maya also wrote a small memoir, The Journey from the Sidewalk, sharing her life story and how she overcame hardship. The book inspired thousands, and Maya was frequently invited to speak at schools and community centers. Ethan, in parallel, became a sought-after speaker, sharing his transformation journey from selfish millionaire to father-husband and philanthropist. He always credited Maya as the one who saved him, to which she would shake her head and smile. "We saved each other, Ethan." One evening, after Ava had fallen asleep, Maya and Ethan sat on the porch, gazing at the stars twinkling over the New York sky. Maya leaned her head on his shoulder, their fingers interlaced. "Did you ever think we'd get here?" she asked softly. Ethan kissed her hair, his voice deep and warm. "No. I used to think I didn't deserve this happiness. But you gave me a chance, and I'll never stop being grateful." Maya smiled, her eyes drifting to the sunflower necklace. "I used to think love was impossible for someone like me, but you proved me wrong. We turned our mistakes into something beautiful." They sat there in comfortable silence, knowing that whatever the future held, they would face it together. Once a symbol of isolation, the estate overflowed with laughter and love. Ava was growing up in a home rich not only in wealth, but in compassion, and Maya and Ethan knew that their true legacy wasn't money, but hope and transformation, and that legacy would endure.